Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Kane's independent media production. Today we're talking about something very hot in the comments and on the message boards for us. Tuning to the room, tuning for the room, and also what part of it is playing for the room. First thing we want to mention today is the word tuning is a little bit slippery. Tuning a guitar is different than tuning a drum. You may have heard of recording spaces being tuned or performance spaces being tuned in some kind of way. All of these mean different things. And what we're talking about today is the idea that we can work with our drum sound given the space that we're in to get the optimal result. On one end of the spectrum, we have something like maybe a recording booth, which is very, very small, super duper dead. Not dissimilar from maybe like the inside of a closet that's full of clothes. On the other hand, we might have something like a gymnasium where the sound is so big and so boomy that from 5 feet away, if you close your eyes, like you can't even tell where it's coming from. These are the furthest extent of the spectrum, and most of the time when we're playing, we're living somewhere in between these two things. What this means for us is that we're playing an acoustic instrument, and beyond just how we hit it, which is very important, and we're going to get to that later, there are some things that we need to know about tuning and also muffling. Big part of it is muffling, to figure out what to do when we find ourselves in a place where the sound of the drums is essentially problematic and we can't control it. You will see people talk extemporaneously about the idea that wide open is the only way. You should be able to tune wide open and play in any space, anywhere in the world. That's nonsense. Let's put that away. Let's instead say that we have lots of tools at our disposal beyond just tuning, and sometimes we have to utilize those too. Now, setting aside the extremes that we talked about earlier and considering the sorts of places that we're really actually going to be finding ourselves playing most of the time, what we're actually trying to do is counteract the effect that the space is having on our drum sound. When we find ourselves in a super resonant room on the boomy warehouse or concert hall size of the spectrum, what we're going to find ourselves needing to do is promote articulation and clarity and reduce the overall resonance of the instruments that we're playing, because the room is providing a tremendous amount of that, and it's going to bolster the more bright staccato sounds we're making. A beautiful place to see this in action is concert snare drum. Concert hall, big room, generally speaking, tuned quite tight and with a lot of different options for muffling to perfectly dial in the articulation so that maybe the drummer is standing at it and it sounds like popcorn going off, but out in the house, it has a beautiful, big, full sound that's still able to cut through the rest of the orchestra. On the other side of the spectrum, extremely dead room. No resonance, you clap your hands, it's completely dead. And now we need to figure out how to get clarity and a little bit of brightness and a little bit of articulation into this situation where everything is getting squashed because there's no reflectivity coming off of the surroundings. You may find yourself in indoor or outdoor environments too, where there's reflections coming back that are so slow that it sounds like an echo or like a slapback kind of thing. And that's another instance where we need to be generating tone and fullness from the instrument itself, because the articulation and the clackiness is already in the room and we don't need more of that. Consider the following comparison. We're in our studio here, so we're working effectively in one acoustic environment, but we decided to use some plugins and synthesize the effect of a larger room on two similar grooves. First, we're going to hear the drums wide open, and then we're going to hear them with choices I made in that environment to get a clearer, cleaner, and better sound for me. With the initial sound, that's wide open, that's mid to low tuning, it's got quite a bit of articulation, a ton of resonance, great for unmiked situations, but it's a little much when you start to envision a larger room with a lot more resonance like we're doing with this reverb. So my solution for this that I use all the time, I actually did the same thing to the snare and the toms, and that was to lower the tension on the Reso head slightly, raise the tension on the batter head slightly, and apply a very small amount of muffling. We're talking about 1 to 2 small pieces of tape just on the batter. That's it. Additionally, in the bass drum, we chose to reorient the pillow so that there was more coverage on the batter head and the Reso head to just bring the resonance down so we could have a little more punch. To top it off, we even did things to the cymbals. We put a bandana inside of the hi-hats to remove some of the extra sibilance that's getting lit up by that reverb. And I cinched down the ride cymbal just a bit on the felt so it's not wagging around as much as it was before. This is the one you got to watch out for. Make sure that you don't hit it too hard because there is a possibility of damage, but it is an effective solution in a pinch. At this point, you might ask yourself, well, what if the drums are mic'd and it's going through a PA and there's a sound guy and there's a lot of other stuff in between me and the ultimate sound? Well, the fact of the matter is that the sound you're making is the sound that's going to come out of the PA ultimately. So all of this still applies. And I do these things whether I'm being mic'd or not. I think about them in every playing environment that I'm in because at the end of the day, either I'm trying to give this sound to the audience acoustically or I'm trying to give it to the sound engineer so that he can work with it and get a great sound out front without having to gate things and adjust things and fix stuff with the acoustic sound that's challenging in that environment. Clear communication, making friends with and working with whoever is engineering for you is so important because they are in charge of what the audience is going to hear ultimately. They have an awful lot of power and they want to work with you. They want to help make a great sound and a great show. So remember, lines of communication open, be kind, be cordial, be professional. Realize that whatever you think they need, you could be wrong. So make sure that if they're struggling, if they're having an issue, that you're at least trying to work with them on it rather than just getting frustrated that they're screwing up your sound or something like that. Because fact of the matter is, we're all on the same team. It's us in front of the audience. Let's be a team. For the vast majority of us that are playing shows, we are not traveling with our own personal audio engineer who knows our setup and has all our in-ears ready and all of that stuff. We are usually working with someone who is local, perhaps employed by the venue, who doesn't know us, doesn't know anything about us personally, hopefully has a stage plot, but other than that, they just know where we're going to be, and we have to figure it out. This is where it becomes very important, if possible, to have someone in your group who knows how the band should sound, has a good sense of balance and what the ultimate sound should be, and who also is a people person, so that they can be a liaison between the band, the rest of the band, and the person engineering for you. This creates a nice triangle of communication where the person engineering is not hearing a ton of voices on stage asking for or complaining about things. And also, they know that the person who's coming to them from the band knows what they need. They can speak to the engineer and ultimately create the sound as quickly as possible and keep everybody happy. Once we've moved beyond just talking about resonance and openness versus more muffled or deader or punchier, there's a whole plethora of other things that you could run into that can possibly drive you crazy, which may be like a standing wave in the room where there's a note on the floor tom that's feeding back or something like that, or there might be a situation where the resonance on the snare drum is getting into the vocal mic and causing it to feed back because the singer's standing in front of you. There are things that we can't control, and to the extent that we might have to start tuning things in ways that are not our optimal pitch for the floor tom, or muffling the snare a little more than we would like to stave off something like feedback. This comes back to making sure that we can be versatile, that we can be okay with things not being perfect every time, and work within a little bit of a span of degrees of acceptable sounds for ourselves so that we can do a good gig and also make the rest of the band function. This is another reason why we don't really talk about settings, tuning settings, numbers, any kind of devices here, because if that is your starting point and you're open-minded to adjusting from there, have a field day. But I've never, ever in my life been 100% happy with the same tuning in two different rooms. Even if I'm just adjusting it a tiny bit, I'm always adjusting it because there are variables in there that you cannot plan for. One little side thing I want to mention too is that if you're looking at what we did here, we talked about it, we changed every single part of the kit. We did things to the hi-hat, the floor tom, everything. Don't feel like you have to do that. If there's one part of the kit that's being weird on the gig, you can just adjust that one part. Don't feel like you have to change everything. There's plenty of times where I have tape on one of the toms and not the other one, or tape only on the snare drum, or whatever it may be. Just remember that this is about solving a problem and not going through a methodology that has to happen to every part of the kit. Identify the problem, solve it, move on. We're big on cooking analogies here, and never before has it been truer than now. What we're talking about is taking your cooking into an unfamiliar kitchen and trying to figure out how to make things you've made a million times in a room that's not your room. It means that your knives are still going to work, your plates are still going to work, but you're going to have to make adjustments, and you're going to have to be okay with making those adjustments, because the point of it is to deliver the food, not whether or not we're comfortable in the space. So if we can become a person through experience that can be comfortable in most any space, and even at the worst extremes, figure out a way to power through, at the very least to where the audience doesn't know that we're uncomfortable, that's a win. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this comparison. If you like what you see, please follow the link below to the Patreon and help support the channel. It's the best way to keep us going here through muffled and unmuffled and other kinds of drum sounds as well. Also, like, comment, and subscribe. Click the notification bell so you hear about our new videos. And we would love to hear about your horror stories of rooms that you've played in, because I know I have plenty. They're running through my brain right now. But I don't just want to hear about the story. I want to know what you did to make it okay, because I've never had one that I couldn't do, but boy, we've gotten close.